Okay. So I'm going to start. There's still a couple people we're waiting for, but let's see what happens with that. Hopefully they'll come. Hopefully everything's okay. I always know that the traffic is bad. It can be bad. So nevertheless, I'm going to start. And remember that the last quiz is due tomorrow, Friday night. So please get that last quiz done. That's number one. Number two, I sent out an announcement. I increased for the extra credit paper. I increased the points value to 50 points. So some people might change their minds and decide that they want to do it now if they know they might get more points. So I extended the deadline until Friday. If you already handed it in, don't worry about it. It will be graded with 50 points. It's fine. Don't worry. You're finished. But if you did want to maybe change your mind and do it, that's okay. You have until 11:59 p.m. on Friday tomorrow. Okay, and then that's it. I won't take. It's an extra credit, so I'm not going to take anything after that. Please don't submit it late, or try to, I hope. Let's see, what else? I guess this is the third thing then. So our final exam is next week. It's here, same classroom, same time, same day, nothing changes, at least as it was explained to me when I asked about the final exam schedule. I was told that you meet in the same classroom, the same date. It kind of acts as your final class. So anyway, so expect to come to class, and I will hand out the final exam, and then you can take it. I already have it done. I have it printed out, so it'll be, well, I can talk a little bit about that later. But I do want to hand this out. I composed or put together a study guide for the final exam where every question that's going to be on the final exam is here. So if you follow the study guide and look in your notes, and look at the quizzes, then you should be okay. So I'll hand this out. I want to go over the study guide at the end of class, have some time at the end of class tonight, so I'll be able to just go over it quickly. I mean, I can't go over it in too much detail, I don't think, well, because it's covering everything from the course, but I can at least answer some questions at the end of the class. So let me get into finishing off what I wanted to finish off from last week, which is jihad. I was talking about the idea of holy war, just war, and I ended with just war, and was just going to talk a little bit about jihad and what that is, which means I should have the other PowerPoint on here. Excuse me. So let me just get out the other PowerPoint I was using, and it'll be ready. Where were we? Just war. Justice. There we go. Okay, so there's our definition of jihad. It is an Arabic word. It's a word which describes a Muslim person's struggle against anything that stands in opposition to submission to God's will. That's maybe a little bit longer than it needs to be. Basically, it's a word for any Muslim struggle against anything that stands in opposition to the will of God, anything that keeps a Muslim or a Muslima, a Muslim man or a Muslim woman, from properly following God's will in his or her life. Comes from the Arabic word jahada, which means to make an effort, or he made an effort in verbal form. He made an effort. He I guess you could also say struggled, but literally it's he made an effort. Usually jihad is translated as holy war, but that's a misleading way to translate it because it doesn't necessarily mean actual war or fighting. No, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It can sometimes mean that. But literally the word jihad means to strive for or struggle in the path of God. Okay, that's what it literally means. But it often can also be used to refer to also religiously sanctioned warfare, like a just war. Okay, so probably saying just war rather than holy war is better. But it can kind of show you how people's opinions are. When it's the case of, say, Christianity or the history of warfare in Christianity, they talk about a just war. When it's Islam, it's a holy war, you know? So it's really just war in the case of Islam is what's going on here. Hello, Miss Link. That's all right. Link. And so are we one person? Okay. I handed out a study guide for the final exam, so to you, take a look at it. I'll try to go over it. I want to go over it later at the end of class. So hold on to it. So it's Islamic just war, the idea of a just war, really. In Arabic, sometimes you'll hear the phrase jihad fi sabil Allah. You're striving in the cause of God. Okay, jihad in the cause of God, and that's how it's kind of seen. It's seen from the vantage point or the point of view of one's relationship with God first and foremost. Striving in the cause of God means one's own personal adherence to Islam, being a faithful Muslim man or woman. Unfortunately, and there's really no way of getting around this, but unlike as I mentioned before in the previous class, that whereas you have some religions like Christianity and Buddhism and other smaller religions like Jainism I mentioned, which have a pacifist strand, they have this tradition of pacifism, which means that you oppose the use of violence to resolve a dispute, for the right word there, to resolve a disagreement. Islam and some religions like Judaism and Islam do not. There does not seem to have been that pacifist view. I don't want to say peaceful view. I mean, because it is peaceful. There are peaceful elements. But I mean pacifism, where violence is never tolerated. Violence is seen as just a part of life. God commands violence in the reading from Deuteronomy chapter 20. And it's also part of Islamic history, so you can't get around it. It's part of the origins of Islam. We know that Muhammad, who again died in 632. Now, if someone wants to inform me, I thought he was born around 580, or maybe 560. But I know he died in 632. Muhammad. You can also see it spelled closer to the Arabic as Muhammad. Okay, I mean it's the same thing. It's just one's a traditional spelling in English and one's more based on how it is in Arabic, as close as you can get in English. He dies in 632 CE. Anyways, I forget when he was born. I could look it up, but someone could look it up for me. 570? That was quick. So 570, he was born. I'm assuming that's, well, anyways, 570 CE. $570. So it kind of split the difference. I said 560 or 580, and it's 570. All right. We know that Muhammad and his followers engaged in military campaigns against enemies of the faith, especially in the city of Mecca. Now, I guess I'll show you a map because so that you know where I'm talking about. You have to know just a basic geography of the Arabian Peninsula to know what I'm talking about. Google Maps, where are you? Okay, so we got to go over here past Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. Peninsula because it's bounded on water on 3 sides, so it's a peninsula. Florida's a peninsula. Okay, so you see here, there's the city Mecca, yes? Up here is the city of Medina, and Muhammad had to leave Mecca because he was, and his followers, because they're in fear for their life. And so they went up north and they settled in that city of Medina. In fact, the word Medina, basically the name is the city of the prophet. So it comes to be known after Muhammad the prophet because he was so famous, and because that's really where the origins of the community come from, where a lot of the rules and the structures start to be brought together in the city of Medina. It was known by another name, which I'm not going to go into. Yes? No, not for me? Okay, whatever. But he and his group would attack caravans, and a caravan is like animals that you pile stuff on top of that you're going to take to marketplaces to sell. They're called caravans. And so you have this long line of like camels and donkeys all piled with all sorts of goods that would be sold in marketplaces in other towns and cities. Okay, so there was a lot of commerce that would go along the coast here of the Arabian Peninsula, along these various towns, and then the city of Mecca was a very rich city because businessmen would stop there. They would stop and take a rest and whatever, and then they would move on to the north, so that they could come up to the north, and then they could go up to, Israel's here, but go to other places like Egypt, and they could sell the stuff that they had. So what Muhammad did, he started to attack the caravans that were coming out of Mecca to start kind of starving Mecca of its wealth, of its business. Why? Because he wanted the city back. It was his city. He had been born there. He was a native of there, and that's the place where God had revealed himself to him. So it was considered a sacred city amongst the early Muslims. So, and the people in Mecca were not Muslims. They were opposing the message that Muhammad was bringing. So they were enemies of the faith. They were enemies of God. They were refusing. They were standing in the way of the will of God, which was to bring this message to Mecca and to the world. So they fought them. Because the majority of these military campaigns were undertaken mostly in the last 10 years of Muhammad's life, so near the end of his life, the last decade when Muhammad was alive, it's hard to look to the Quran, the religious scripture of Islam, to find rules for war. Okay? Doesn't mention it very much, nor should it. The Quran, or the Quran, also spelled, okay, is the sacred book, the sacred writing of Islam. It contains God's revelations to Muhammad. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say it's more like the revelation that's written down in heaven with God, and that Muhammad kind of saw pieces of it every now and then he would have visions of it and would recite it to people, and people would write down what he said. And anyway, so you can't. It's hard to look to the Quran itself for a complete account. It's not. It's an incomplete account of Islamic doctrine on war. Why? Because it comes at the last 10 years of Muhammad's life, when they're not fighting so much anymore. Because eventually, what happens is Muhammad is able to attack and take the city of Mecca and capture it. Okay, and it becomes an Islamic city. It becomes basically the capital of Islam, and so there's no need for war anymore. So, there are, if you're looking for a systematic doctrine of warfare, kind of like the just war doctrine, it's kind of like the same thing in Christianity. Augustine states his views on warfare, but it takes another person, this man Gratian, to kind of bring all the strands and threads together into one place where people can all see them all together. And then you have really the beginning of reflection. People can start thinking about what this means, these various rules mean about conducting warfare. It's kind of the same thing with Islam. Muhammad mentions warfare from time to time. We read from the Quran, from Surah 2, chapter 2 in the Quran, the surah called the Cow, where it makes 2 references to killing in warfare, and that's it out of all the text. And it's a much longer surah than what we read. What we read was just a selection, an extract. It's a much longer chapter. But here you have like 2 references. So the same thing with the Quran. You have references here and there to fighting and warfare, but there's nothing systematic. There's nothing like the just war theory that's outlined, like, okay, you can have warfare in these circumstances and under these conditions. Where do you go if you can't go to the Quran, the sacred book, at least not completely? Well, you have to go to what is called the hadith, the traditions about Muhammad, the stories about Muhammad and what he thought and what he believed about how one should live as a faithful Muslim. They're called hadith. These are traditions of actions. It includes just about the whole range of life of Muhammad. Not just what he said, but what he did as well. It includes even what he's silent about. And these, more than the Quran actually, the hadith, the traditions, I know it's ahadith is the plural in Arabic, but these traditions of Muhammad, actually those govern the life of a Muslim, the day-to-day life of a Muslim, more than the Quran. I'm not saying the Quran's not believed in, but in how you are to practically live out the teachings of the Quran, how the Prophet Muhammad himself did, you look to the traditions. And so that's where you need to look, the tradition of the sayings and deeds of Muhammad, to find some idea of what he thought about warfare, and to supplement the few places in the Quran where it mentions warfare and fighting. So that's where you look to the hadith, you look to the traditions from Muhammad for some kind of coherent, understandable idea of jihad. Not so much to the Quran itself, the sacred writing. As in the case of the just war tradition, and we'll see a lot of overlap here with the just war tradition because it's reasonable. People think in similar ways. So as in the case of the just war tradition, Islamic commentaries on war must be selected from a variety of sources, not just one place. And the principal purpose of jihad, or warfare, we could say Islamic just warfare, Islamic just war, is to promote religious, social, and political order. Okay? It's meant to promote order, not disorder. So it's not just violence for the sake of violence, killing for the sake of killing. There has to be a reason for it. There are 2 categories of jihad. Back to my PowerPoint. What am I looking for here? And on my eyeglasses on. There we go. the greater and the lesser jihad. There are two categories, two types of jihad, the greater and the lesser. The greater jihad is warfare within oneself against evil or temptation. That's what the greater jihad is. Okay, it's a personal warfare, a spiritual warfare that happens within one's soul, where one is tempted to do evil or to not live according to the will of Allah or God, and you are fighting against that temptation. You're always fighting to try to do the will of God. And that's the greater warfare, the fighting against yourself. That's maybe even the harder warfare, the more difficult warfare, to change yourself, to defeat yourself. The lesser jihad is when we get into defending Islam against aggression. Okay, so notice defending. It's most Islamic scholars, from at least what I've read, would say that jihad should always be defensive. Okay, so just like just war, it should be. In Pius XII, remember Pius XII said that a just war should only really be fought for defensive purposes. Okay, which is true. That's one of the purposes of a just war, but you can remember traditionally there are other reasons for just wars, like getting someone to return something that was taken and stuff like that, not necessarily defending yourself. But nevertheless, Islamic scholarship seems to agree that the lesser jihad, when you actually have warfare, it should be physical warfare between groups. It should be a defensive warfare. So it involves conflict, and it is strictly regulated. So there are various rules. For example, just like in just war with the discrimination of object, you cannot harm non-combatants, people who are not fighting in the war. Okay, so you can't blow up hospitals or just blow up people's homes because they live in the country that you're at war with. Of course, we do that sometimes, but we always have a reason. Anyways, so the same thing in Islamic just war or jihad. You cannot harm non-belligerents, non-combatants. You cannot harm, specifically, you cannot harm those who are not fighting against you. You cannot harm women. So women are always off limits. I guess even if they're fighting against you, I'd have to ask an Islamic scholar. I don't know. I mean, like if you got a bunch of women with machine guns, who are coming for you, can you respond as a male against them in warfare, or do you have to not harm them as well? Babies are not supposed to be harmed. Again, if a baby has a machine gun, does that mean all bets are off? I don't know. Say, baby, what you doing with a machine gun? I'm going to kill you. Anyways, well, I don't know, because when I was in Papua New Guinea, they have machetes. And it was not uncommon to see little 3-year-olds with machetes. They're not babies, but they're infants. Well, they're not infants, but they're toddlers, some of them. And they're just there hacking away, hacking away with their machetes, because a machete is, it's a part of life. You need it to cut up food and stuff like that. So they didn't think anything of it. No one was worried about the safety of the baby. It was just like, oh yeah, there's the baby with the machete hacking away at the coconut. Or cutting up greens to be cooked in lunch. It's no big deal. So I don't know, if a baby is coming at you with a machete, does that change things? So you can't kill those who are not fighting you. You can't kill women. You cannot kill babies. You cannot kill the sick. You cannot or should not destroy the property of those who offer you no resistance, which I'm assuming includes surrender. If people surrender to you, you don't destroy their stuff. And interestingly enough, because there should be no compelling anyone in religion, you should not undertake a jihad for the purpose of converting other people. Now, conversion might still kind of happen, okay, but that's not supposed to be the primary purpose, apparently, of jihad, of at least a lesser jihad, which is actual warfare. And if you don't follow these rules, then you will have to account to God on the day of judgment. But then all religions say something like that. It doesn't matter, Christian, Judaism. If you do that, you'll have to account to God. People still do it anyway. So these are the ideals. These are the ideals, just like with just war, of what you're supposed to follow. And there are more of them. I'm just giving you a summary here. I'm not telling you everything. The classical doctrine of jihad developed between the 700s and the 800s AD, so sometime after Muhammad's life. Say C. Okay. So as you can see, if he died in 632, so it's the 700s, so it's within like 70 years, okay? You start having this idea. Well, why was this? Well, again, historically, violence is a part of the early history of Islam. After Muhammad died, there was a civil war, basically. Actually, there are a number of civil wars amongst his followers. But also, even during the time of Muhammad, he still sent out from Mecca, he would still send out armies to conquer and to try and bring tribes into agreement with his message that he had received from God. So by the time Muhammad was dead, we saw the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Almost all of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula was under the control of Islam. They had all converted to Islam. And after Muhammad died, that didn't stop. They pushed up farther north and eventually conquered places like Syria, which was above, and Israel, which was also above. So there was a lot of territorial conquest. So it makes sense that during this time period after Muhammad, when there was so much more military conquest, they would think about, well, what are the rules that we need to follow in our warfare? Are there rules? Can we find them in the Quran? Well, not so much. Well, where else do we look? Well, let's look at Muhammad. Muhammad was a military leader. He led battles. How did he act? Okay, and so during the 700s, 800s, you get this development of the classical doctrine of what a jihad is. Let me say that. Already mentioned that. Oh, I should also have added the elderly also. You can't kill elderly people. So that would be also in the group. Women, babies, the sick, the elderly, the aged cannot be killed. Just like with just war, no pun intended, with jihad, it has to be declared by a recognized Muslim government. It has to have a competent authority, just like with just war. It just can't be, I can't think of another word other than just to say. It can't be any group deciding on its own that it wants to go to war against another group or a person. There has to be a recognized Islamic authority that can say, yes, we are in a state of warfare, of active warfare with this other group in the defense of Islam. And it has to be declared for legitimate reasons. So, just like with just cause, in the when we talked about the jus ad bellum, the laws for going to war, you needed a just cause. It couldn't be trying to promote, had to be something that was worth fighting for and would not promote, or was not based on simply hatred or revenge or some evil motive. And it's the same thing in Islam. Okay, that you should have legitimate reasons. Your reasons should be defensive, but also it can include conversion, propagation of the faith. If you have the hope that the people that you're going to conquer might come over to Islam, that can also be a consideration as a legitimate reason. Before launching any jihad, Muslims have to offer unbelievers the chance to submit to Islamic rule. So, and this kind of ties in with last resort, you might say, in jus ad bellum, where you don't have to immediately go to war because there is an issue. you can offer terms of surrender to those who are your opponents. You say, okay, if this happens, we will not go to war with you. Okay, as long as you submit to us and acknowledge our right, then there might not be fighting, or there won't be fighting. And submission, what did submission mean? For submitting to Islamic rule, it could mean converting to Islam, just outright converting to Islam. But that didn't happen always. You know, there were a lot of areas that were under Islamic control that remained Christian or Jewish or whatever. Well, you couldn't remain pagan, I should say this. You could not remain what they called an idolater, one who worshipped many gods or worshipped statues. That was a no-go for Islamic rulers. And so they would oppress those groups. But Christians and Jews, for example, if they wanted to stay Christians and Jews, they would not be forced to convert, but they would have to pay a tax. There would be some sort of tax, which I guess would make sense in the mind of their Islamic rulers, because they are receiving the protection and the benefits of the Islamic government, but even though they are not Muslims. So they would pay a tax towards that. After this conquest area, which is roughly this time period, the 700s to the 800s, well, I have here mid-7th century to mid-8th century. It's roughly the same. Mid-7th would be the 650s until the 750s. But after don't worry about dates. I'm just giving you the basic information anyways. But after this era of conquest, during the lifetime of Muhammad, but also after Muhammad had died, was dead, warfare pretty much came to a halt, and between Muslims and non-Muslims, and they basically accepted a state of truce at that period, that there would be no warfare between Muslim and non-Muslim states. That became the normal situation. The time of constant warfare just was over with. And so I guess people just wanted to settle down. They were tired of fighting all the time. They said, okay, Christians over there are not going to become Muslims, even if we ask them to. Could we have a jihad against them to make them Muslims? We could, but maybe we need to just settle down and establish a life, because if you're in constant warfare, it's chaos and disorder. It's hard to establish a life for yourself. Okay? So jihad has not always meant actual warfare. There's a point to take away from this. It primarily is intended, it changes, I should say with the Sufis it changes. In the beginning, it did mean actual warfare, a defensive war against those who were opposing Islam. But as time goes on, and that's the lesser jihad. As time goes on, as Muslims think about jihad and what it means, and they understand that there is a spiritual warfare as well, this inner greater struggle. And so jihad does not always mean actual warfare. How does this come about? Well, it comes about amongst a group of people called the Sufis. The Sufis. This is a group, and you see a definition there. Who are the Sufis? They are orders of Islamic men who seek close, direct, and personal union with God. In other words, they're mystics. Okay, they're mystics. They do all and this is just a picture of one group from a long, long time ago. But there are different groups of Sufis depending on which person they follow as their teacher. Apparently there are many different orders. I'm not an expert, so don't ask me, but I'm sure you can look it up on Wikipedia and see all the orders of Sufis there are. But they all share one thing. They're all Muslims. Okay, they all believe in Islam. But they Sufis are men who, and now they're starting to include women, but it was mainly men and is mainly men who wanted a more direct contact with the presence of God in their life. And you see this in just about every religion. Christianity has monks and nuns. You have the Sufis. Hindus have, they have all different names for this, but I want to say a siddha, but a sannyasi, siddha. There are different terms. I don't want to get my terms. Might be mixing up my terms here, but no other terms coming. And Buddhists also have monks that are called bhikshus, okay, and bhikshuni for women. So every religion seems to have this segment or group of people who are mystics. They follow the religion, but they also want some kind of a deeper life in the religion, deeper contact with their god or gods. See, this is not an unusual characteristic of religions, of human religions. And that's basically what the Sufis are. If you want to consider Sufis, if it helps you to understand them, to think of them in a Christian sense as monks and nuns, or more monks because they're men, or hermits. Well, they're not hermits, no. More monks. Monk is a better thing. Then do that, okay? But we just recognize that we're talking here about two different religions, and so it might not be exactly the same type of thing between monks and Sufis. Who are the Sufis? The Sufis are the ones that around the 12th century, so the 1100s, they take the 1100s or the 12th century, these groups of men called the Sufis, these mystics, they're the ones who are credited with taking the idea of the lesser jihad, which means actual warfare, and turning it into a spiritual warfare, into the greater jihad. So the Sufis defined jihad as from a spiritual point of view, referring to an individual's inner struggle against unbelief or sin, but it could also be understood socially as society's struggle to bring the Islamic community in line with God's laws, with God's will. So, but it's basically a spiritual struggle. A little background about the Sufis: we don't know where they came from. We don't have any historical knowledge of where this group. We know it comes from Islam. They're Muslims, and they emerge within Islam. But it appears that they emerged very early within the history of Islam, and so early that some scholars think that the Sufis may have actually been influenced by Christian monks who were living in the desert. Because if you look at the map, this is all pretty much desert. And we know that there were Christians and Jews living in the areas around Medina and even around places like Mecca, but certainly around Medina, there were tribes of Jews or clans of Jews that lived there in the city. But up here, like in Syria, the country of Syria, there were tons of Christian monks and a long tradition of monasticism, of monk-like living in this area, as also in Egypt and the area of Israel. So scholars think that maybe there was some kind of influence, some cross-pollination that happened where, through the influence of Christian monks, monasticism kind of develops within Islam that they call it Sufi. Now, we don't know what the word Sufi means. We have no idea what it means. It's lost to us. That's why I have question marks with the word, because we don't know what the word means. There is the Arabic word suf, which means wool. Suf in Arabic means wool. Why could that be the term that Sufi comes from? Well, because the early followers wore woolen garments. They wore garments, clothing that was made out of wool, suf. in Arabic. So maybe it was that. But there's also the word sufa for those who sit on the bench in the mosque. So sufa, okay, which I'm not going to write it out for you. I'll just tell you. It's a word that refers to those who sit on the bench in a mosque. Well, it would have gone off anyways, even if I had my. Hold on one second. Hello, I'm in my class right now. I will do so. Thank you. Bye. It doesn't matter if I put it on vibrate or not. It would have still rung because I didn't need it for the alarm. So sorry about that. That was my brother. No idea why he's calling me. Anyways, anywho, sufa. So someone who sits on the bench in the mosque. So I guess in a mosque or in some famous mosque, there was a bench where people would sit and maybe discuss Islam, discuss the religion, talk about God. And so maybe they were considered very pious people. I don't know, but it's a possibility. And then also there is the word sufiya, which means those who have been purified. And this I'm going to write in script. Those who have been purified. Those who sit on the bench. I know I said I wasn't going to write it, but since I'm here, I might as well. Okay. Those who have been purified, which, okay, yes. Why are they seeking union with God? Because they want to be purified of their sins and their imperfections. Possible. But again, this is all after the fact, people trying to guess, where does this name come from? Because no one really knows. So these are three possibilities. Wool, those who sit on the bench in the mosque, or those who have been purified. But really, nobody knows. Okay. All right, so that's pretty much that for the Sufis. I can move on from jihad. Yay! So that's all I'm going to say about jihad. Moving on. Oh, in this picture, the guy, see, one of the things, like, they have techniques, and one of the things that they do is dance. They've got those big hats, and they dance. Let's see if I can do it. So left hand like that, the right hand like this. Yeah. Whoa! Well, you can see it affects your brain, right? So they do it a lot, and apparently it can put them into a trance. And by going into kind of another state of mind, that opens the mind up for the presence of God to come in. So they can have, I don't know, visions of God, or just this feeling of, I don't know, unity with all creation. All sorts of kind of transcendental feelings. But that's what they're doing. And this is the picture they're showing. I don't know if they're not dancing, they're standing still then, but if you go online, you can see stuff like this. And maybe I'll show you something. Time, don't we? Yeah. And it's okay if I get done with class early tonight. Accepted as a mercy, as a gift from Dr. Den. Let's see. Find some Sufis dancing. Sufis dancing. Good night, miss. See you next week. The Sufi whirling dervishes. So if you've ever heard the phrase a whirling dervish, then this is where it comes from.
but check the website to make sure they're going to be here. Also, it's about 40, you need a per person, it's about $20. Let's go inside.
Because it's dirty, obviously. Now, I've not seen this before, so.
This kind of whirling is a form of physical meditation. It is an 800-year-old tradition that was developed in the city of Konya. Essentially, it is a form of worship that has become a popular cultural attraction in Turkey.
There you go. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Okay, so I mean, the purpose, he said it's a performance. It's really not a performance. I mean, they're doing it for, they're kind of, it's like being a guest, allowing a guest into your home. They're allowing them to see this, this what is really a religious practice, as he said. It's meant to bring you to union with God. It's not a show. It's not like Broadway. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. So I just want to make that clear because, I mean, you see all the tourists come in and they've got a time, so they're allowing people to see what they do. Not that it was ever, I think, hidden from people, but there was some, I think in my readings, there was some persecution of Sufis because Muslims didn't know what to make of them. But once they realized that they were truly Muslims, they were just looking for a deeper appreciation or a deeper experience of God, then people understood that, then they were accepted into the Islamic community. So that's what it looks like. But that's I don't know if they all dance. I mean, some of them do, but I don't know if they all have these practices of dancing, but certainly meditational practices, like, and you find this in just about every religion, where you have practices where you focus on a word or a thought or an experience, and you focus maybe looking at your chest with your eyes maybe half open, half closed, and you think about your breathing and you control your breathing while you're thinking about this experience or this word. And as you do it long enough and you control your body and you're controlling the oxygen in your body, people say they can have experiences, visions or feelings of peacefulness or being united to all the world and stuff like that. I never have, but then that's because I don't have the patience for any of that. I just don't. I wish I did, but I'm sorry. I can't sit under a freezing cold, waterfall for 99 days, while meditating. Just Maddie ain't gonna do that. So for me, I'll have to wait for my Christian heaven. Hopefully I'll get in. But some people can do that, and Sufis are like that. Okay, does religion have to be violent? Hopefully the answer to that is no. If anyone came to that, did everyone get it? Did I give everyone a copy of the study guide? Did anyone not get a copy of it? Everyone got a copy? Okay. There's only one person that's not here, so okie dokie. Whatchamacallit? Well, let's assume that that's the case, that religion does not have to be violent, because one of our readings, I guess our last reading, was this reading document on human fraternity, human brotherhood, and I would assume sisterhood as well, for world peace and living together. That was signed by Pope Francis of the Roman Catholic Church, and this man Ahmed El Tayeb, who is the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, which I'll tell you in a moment what Al-Azhar is. And so we read this document about basically how religions, or at least two religions, Christianity and Islam, can coexist and live together without resorting to violence. And so I'm going to use that as the basis for, or I did use that as the basis for my talk about this question. Does religion have to be violent? And what I might do now is, if you want, we can take the break now and come back in 10 minutes, or I could just have no break and push through. And you let me know, and then we'll have the review after this. And maybe we'll hopefully get done a little bit early. What do you think? Or we can still do the break, and then maybe I'll do the break now. Is that acceptable? And then, do you understand? Because I'm not getting no feedback. What, Miss Philistine?
Oh, sorry.
Was that you?
Sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. I don't mind.
No, when you said, do you understand? It was just like this line from this movie, not just saying.
Oh. No, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not getting any. I don't have my eyeglasses on, but I can see well enough. Like I'm not getting any facial cues, or just bodily cues, but no one's saying anything either. So I guess I'll make the decision. All right, we'll take our 10-minute break now and come back, and I'll do this. So it's 6:38, so please be back by 6:48. Well, that's going to go off anyways. Okay. Hey, big guy, it's me. Not bad. It's fine. I'm teaching it. We have a break right now. What did you want? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well. All right. All right. Well, why don't we talk about it when I get back home tonight? Will you be up? All right. Yeah, I still have to buy her a birthday card. I forgot the other day. I bought her a Christmas card, and I forgot to buy her a birthday card. All righty. See you later. Bye. I wonder if I don't know. Does I ever come back? Has she been gone the whole time? Oh, since the break. Okay, I wasn't sure if she came back from before. Alrighty, I guess I'll start then. Check the time. 6:53. Okay. Anywho, I have just some preliminary comments before I talk about this document from the Pope and this gentleman, the Pope and the Grand Imam. Does religion have to be violent? I mean, I think by now you probably know that my answer would be no, obviously. It does not have to be violent. Nothing has to be violent. It's not, but I don't think religion or violence is baked into religion either. Although you have to be careful with that, because if you do believe that religion comes from a supernatural source, and that source is telling you to commit violence, then you could say that it is kind of baked in. But I think generally, we've seen that no, when we think about religion, we usually don't immediately associate it with violence, in the sense that you get the feeling of, if there's religion present, there's also violence present. You know, we don't say that religion is a form of violence that does such and such, that believes such and such, such and such. When you go to a church or a mosque or a synagogue, you're not assuming to see violent activities, or you're not assuming it's a place of chaos and disorder and aggression. You're assuming it's a place of calm and peace and stuff like that. And so that's how I would, when I think about does religion have to be violent, I'd say no. How does religion help us not be violent? When I think about that, I'd say that religion helps someone, a person, to not see himself as an isolated individual. Remember when we looked at, or I talked about the World Health Organization's document on, what is it, violence and health, I think was the title of it, but whatever. It was from the World Health Organization. One of the factors in violence is social isolation. That people feel like they're alone, completely alone. And religion addresses that. Religion helps you to see that you are not an isolated individual, but at the very least, a person is in a relationship to a God and to other human beings, other people who believe. So you're part of a larger group. At least you're part of a relationship with a spiritual being, a God or a spirit or something, but you're also in a larger relationship with other humans. And if you believe that this God or this spiritual entity is the source or the original source of all the universe, all creatures, all humans, and all these things go back to this God or this spiritual entity, then you see there's a sort of unity. You're not isolated. You are unified, that you all belong to a community. You belong to a community. You're not just an isolated individual. You're related to people. You're not just related to people by your belief system, but you're related to everything, because everything comes from this common source, be it a God or a spirit or something. some transcendent source. And so now you're part of a larger community. You're part of everything, which can include even the very physical universe that you're part of. So you don't just treat others as you would want to be treated, which is the golden rule, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But religion helps transform that to, you treat others now as a relative, like a brother or sister, because that's what you are. You all come from the same source. So this God, I'll say God just because instead of having to keep saying God or spirit or other thing, I'll just say a God, okay? But religions are different. Not all religions would necessarily say a God. They might say gods and goddesses and whatever. But the fact that you have this common source in a spiritual being, this God, means that you're kind of like in a family relationship. This God is kind of like the parent, and everything that comes from it is kind of like its children in a way. So if you follow the kind of like the analogy or the metaphor, you are, well, I say it's more like a simile, you are like brothers and sisters of this one parent. And so you should treat each other that way. Brothers and sisters typically look out for each other. They don't try to destroy each other. They don't try to blow each other up or kill each other or abuse each other. That's something that the message of religion brings. The universal brotherhood and sisterhood of humanity. This works even if you don't believe in a God. I mean, I'm talking from a religious perspective, but even if you're an atheist or an agnostic or something, you can still believe that everything on this planet goes back to a single source in our evolutionary cycle. As things evolved on our planet, we all go back to the same group of proteins, you might say. Or if you want to go further, you could say we all go back to the same stardust, the same chemicals, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, the same chemicals that helium, the same chemicals that make up stars and formed our galaxies before us. We are part of that. We come from the same chemical elements. But what does religion bring to that point of view? Because yes, you could be an atheist or an agnostic, someone who's non-religious, and still say, well, I can still believe in the brotherhood and the sisterhood of humankind because we all come from the same stardust, we all come from the same protein soup that started on our planet and from which all creatures evolved. Yes, we don't need religion for that. However, I think you do need religion for a different point of view, because where is the concern for the poor or the weak or the oppressed, the marginalized? Because if you take the evolutionary view, that, just kind of an atheistic evolutionary view, then you believe in this idea of the survival of the fittest, that only those creatures which develop the correct adaptations for their environment will survive and really should survive. Those who have mutations that do not fit the environment might exist for a little period of time, but then just the burden of nature will take its course and that creature will go extinct. It just can't survive in its environment. And if you're an evolutionary person, you might say, well, yeah, that's the way it should be. Survival of the fittest. Exactly how it should be. That's how nature works. It's how it has worked and how it does work. Those that are best adapted to the environment should survive. But human religion teaches differently. In human religion, we see something different. We see a kind of camaraderie, a community, a coming together that seeks to support other members of the species, even those members that maybe, according to evolutionary theory, shouldn't survive. The elderly, the disabled, the mentally ill, okay, those with maladaptations. They're not really very well adapted to their environment. Religion tells people to take care of them. You're supposed to take care of them. You're supposed to look out for the people who are maybe not as strong as everybody else, even though they might not bring maximum benefit to the group. The fact that they exist brings benefit to the group. So that's something I think that religion brings and makes one think about violence. So you don't do violence, and you see this when I talked about jihad, but also just war, that even in the case of where there is violence, or from a religion's point of view, there has to be violence in defense of something, some value. Look at still who's protected. Those who are weak, those who are old. And this is not, I'm not trying to be an ageist or an ableist, or I'm just telling you, these are the groups that normally in evolutionary biology would not survive in the environment, but you're supposed to help them survive. You're supposed to protect them. Even during warfare, these people are protected. These kinds of people are protected. Why? Because they're persons. They're human persons. And there's something special about that. So this kind of leads into the document on human fraternity. And I looked at the document mainly from the perspective of what are some things that are mentioned in the document that tie into religion and violence, how religion can become violent, and how we can stop religion from becoming violent if it looks like it's going to go that way. Okay, so the document was put out by two gentlemen. I have their pictures here in front of me, but I should have put their pictures on the PowerPoint. I apologize for that. I did not. Nevertheless, easy enough to find. History. Just go into my history because I was searching for them. Pope Francis. Oh, the Pope is evil. Don't look at that. No, the Pope. I don't think the Pope is evil. I'm Catholic, so I'm okay with him. It's just that I was looking for a picture of an evil-looking Pope so I could put it on the PowerPoint. Okay, so there's a picture of the current Pope, the one who signed this document, Pope Francis. Okay, he was elected Pope in 2013. Notice that he was elected Pope. The Pope, the Catholic Church is kind of democratic in that way that, well, the people don't, the actual people don't, but representatives of the people, kind of like our Republican government in America, we have representatives who speak for us. The cardinals, these men called cardinals, act as representatives of the whole church, and they elect someone. Could be anybody. Doesn't have to be a fellow cardinal. Doesn't have to be a bishop. Could be me, Of course, then I'd have to be ordained a bishop after that to be Bishop of Rome. But they elect someone, and he was elected Pope in 2013. So it's coming up on 10 years that the guy's been Pope. (2013). And this other gentleman, Ahmed El Tayeb, which, got a picture, let's see, it's under there, there we go, biography. I believe this is his biography. There we are. This is on the website for the Al-Azhar, not the university, it's just called Al-Azhar, Al-Azhar al-Sharif, which I'll describe in a minute. Professor Ahmed, now they have here At-Tayeb. So, but I'll stick with El Tayeb because that's what's on the document, or at least that's on the official document in English that we have. His name Ahmed El Tayeb. Okay, but notice this is different. It probably is At-Tayeb, but I'll stick with what's on the English document. Anyways, who is he? He, in 2010, was appointed the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar al-Sharif, which is in Egypt, so 2010. What is an imam? Well, an imam basically is anyone who leads the prayer service in a mosque. That's what it basically is. anyone can be an imam. If a person has the job of leading the prayer service, they're called an imam. However, in forms of Islam, the imam has kind of developed into a religious expert, kind of like a priest or a rabbi, kind of that kind of person. So an imam can give spiritual advice and decisions to people, and so and can be a leader in the community, and that's what he is. He is the head of this thing called the Al-Azhar Al-Sharif. Now, what is that? Well, from what I could understand, from what I could find out, Al-Azhar Al-Sharif is a large scientific and religious institution. It's Islamic, so its point of view is Islamic. And it combines a whole bunch of groups. Some deal with science. Al-Sharif. The way I understand it for myself is it's kind of like a think tank. You know how think tanks have all different branches, and some people are scholars in politics, some might be scholars in science, some might be philosophers and scholars in philosophy. And it's kind of like what the Al-Sharif is. It's just this big think tank of scientists and intellectuals and thinkers who are doing this from the perspective of Islam. It includes a university, Al-Azhar University, so the same name, Al-Azhar University, which is believed to be is considered one of the most prestigious universities for Islamic learning in the world. And also connected to this university, as you might expect, is Al-Azhar Mosque. So you've got this think tank, Al-Sharif, you've got this university, and you've got this mosque all together. And he's not the head of, I don't think, he might be also considered the head of the mosque, but he certainly is the head of Al-Sharif, and he's kind of a leader in the university and in the mosque as well. So I'm presuming that's why the Pope wanted to sign this document with this man, because he's not like the Pope of Islam. There is no such thing in Islam. There is the community. The community itself is the final authority. But within the community, there are various leaderships, okay? Leaders within the Islamic community throughout the world who have various levels of authority based on, I guess, their connection to the Prophet Muhammad, the length of their history, of their authority, stuff like that. And this guy's one of them. So he would be right up there in authority. People in Islam would listen to him. I don't know if they would listen to him as the final authority, but they would certainly listen to him. And certainly Catholics would listen to the Pope, and a lot of Christians would listen to the Pope as well. Even if they did not believe in the Pope, they would certainly take notice of what he's doing. And so they signed this document. And what's the purpose of the document? The purpose is to show how they can live in brotherhood and sisterhood with each other as Christians and Muslims, respecting their differences, but trying to see ways that they can mitigate and to de-escalate violence and get rid of violence between them, between their two groups. Because you're dealing with the two largest religious groups in the world. Christians, who are over 2 billion people, and Muslims, who are just over 1 billion. I want to say 1.2 billion, but I could be wrong on that. No, actually, I think it's 1.6 billion for Muslims, I believe, actually. So you've got well over 3 billion, approaching 4 billion of the world's population. So that's a large chunk of the world's population represented here by these two men. Okay, where does it start? Well, it starts with me getting back to my PowerPoint. It starts with this, and this is a quotation taken from an autograph that this man gave to somebody. Does anyone know who this man is? He's a great American hero who was a former slave who fled from Maryland, where he was a slave. He crossed over and made it all the way up to New York City so he could be a free man, truly free man. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is Frederick Douglass. Died, I believe, in 1895. Did I write it down? And he was born in 1817. Actually, I will write it down since I have it. He was born in either 1817 or 1818. We're not sure because, of course, he was a slave, so his owners didn't necessarily keep records or care to. And he died in 1895. And he was a great speaker, a great writer, and he gave out this autograph to somebody, which is preserved, I believe it's at Yale, the University of Yale Library. And if you can't, I mean, I love his penmanship. I wish I had this kind of penmanship. But anyways, what did he write? He writes, "There can be no virtue without freedom, and no peace without justice." So there can be no peace without justice. And that kind of spoke to me because I thought, yes, we need to start with justice. In order for there to be peace amongst people, you have to acknowledge them as human beings and as people who are deserving of respect. Justice is the most basic sign of respect. It acknowledges the other person's privileged status as a human being and as a human being with rights. And so if a person has rights, that means I have something that I need to respect there. They have something that is due to them as a human being that they should be given. And so justice leads to peace. Justice, I might have given you the definition before, but I give it to you again. It's the act of giving to someone what is due to that person. And peace is a state or the state of ordered calm or harmony. Okay? A state of ordered calm and harmony. It's not disordered. It's not chaos. Peace is not chaotic. It's not disordered. It is ordered. It makes sense. Okay? You know how things are. And it's calming and harmonious. There isn't disagreement or, again, chaos or disharmony, I should say. So peace is basically a lack of disturbance or security. And oftentimes this security, the security of peace, is assured through custom or law. It's one of the purposes of law. It's to secure peace. So that people know, you can live your life because you know how things are supposed to be. You know that when you go out here tonight, if you drive a car, you know that there are red lights and there are green lights and there are stop signs and there are markings on the road and that people are following them. They don't have to. I mean, there's nothing telling someone that he or she has to follow those markings on the road. It's just paint that some guy put down, or could be a woman as well. I shouldn't be sexist, sorry. But someone put it down on the road, you know? And the fact that there is a road, and that the road is repaired, and it's repaired in a timely fashion and correctly. That's mainly through custom. I mean, there's no law that tells the pothole crew they have to go out and fill the potholes. It's their job. It's custom. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what else would you do? You would go and do it. When they stop doing that, and when you have huge holes and you can't drive on the streets without boom, 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 you need spinal surgery. Like when I was in Papua New Guinea, it was not a peaceful place to be. I mean, it was peaceful in the sense that it was quiet, but I mean, try to drive the roads, man. I mean, there was pothole city, and I mean huge potholes, and to the point where the roads would just end, and then you're on dirt. And not even flat dirt, bumpy dirt, Why? Because they just didn't have this custom of filling in the potholes, mainly because people didn't get paid. The government runs everything and doesn't pay anybody. So why should they? Or they don't have the materials. The government can't buy the materials. So justice is the foundation of peace. Why? Because justice seeks to redress any conflict of needs. It wants to redress them, not address them. It doesn't want to address them. But redress means more like taking care of any conflict between people's needs, so that everyone feels that his or her needs are respected and met, that people's concerns are heard and addressed. Although I would say that there is one thing lacking in this document that doesn't come up really, and I'd have to search it to make sure absolutely the word is not used, but I don't believe the word is actually used. I mean, they talk about beauty, they talk about, actually, peace and justice, goodness, beauty, human brotherhood, coexistence, okay? And the Pope and the Grand Imam said these need to be advocated and promoted, but they never talk about something I think was really important, which is truth. I think that is a mistake in this document, that they don't talk really at all about the importance of truth. And what is truth? Truth is the agreement or the conformity of the mind with reality as it actually is. Or you could simplify it and just say it's the agreement with, or you could simplify it and say that it is reality as it actually is. But of course then the question is, how do you know that reality is actually what it is? Well, we know that really only through our minds. Okay, that's just the way it is. We have brains which have consciousness, and through our consciousness we understand what reality is. And to the extent that our mind is in agreement with that, or that what we're seeing is in agreement with what we think, that's truth. Okay? My mind tells me that there is an opening over there that we call a door that I can walk through. All right? That's what my mind tells me. Now, I can do this, all night if I want to, I can keep on doing it. I can do it around the whole room. And maybe I'll get lucky, Mr. Von Leo, and I'll hit that right spot and I'll get out of the room, like a rat in a maze. But no, it's true. How do I know that that's true? Because my mind appreciates it. Okay? Yes? Looks like it's open, looks like it's empty. I didn't knock into anything, no wall, I didn't smash into anything. So I'm going to assume that the fact that the door is there is true. My mind accords with what really seems to be the case. My mind would like me to be 7'4", playing center in the NBA, making millions. But that's what my mind would like me. But for some reason, this body, when I look down at it, doesn't accord with reality. The reality that I would like it to be in my mind, you know what I'm saying? Hence, Mrs. Storga, no NBA contract. Yet. I'd also need to drop about 30 years off of my life. Anyways, truth. If there is no peace without justice, I don't think there can be justice without truth. If you don't know correctly, rightly, what is due to another person, then how can you give it to them? You have to know the truth of the matter. You have to know truly what someone else deserves. Oops. I guess I did not put it. Maybe I'll... Coexistence. This is not on the PowerPoint. I decided not to define this just because I think coexistence is obvious. Living together. Coexisting. Live the old saying that you hear a billion times, but, who am I to reinvent the wheel? I mean, live and let live. Coexistence. That's the essence of coexistence. I live and I let you live the life that you're living. However, I mean, a question for me is, to what extent can truth coexist with falsehood? What if the way a person is living is truly, or seems truly to me to be false and harmful, even harmful? Where does coexistence end? What do I do? For example, let's say that someone believes someone's a racist. Someone, is anti-black. Let's say it's a white person, is white supremacist, is anti-black, anti any person of color, any person who has a colored skin, or is not white, let's put it that way. So Asians would be included. Can I coexist? Can I live and let live with this person? Yes, I guess I can. If I don't have to deal with the person, maybe. But what if I do have to deal with that person? If that person's my boss, or someone that I just have to deal with in my life? What if that person is the father of my child? What I should say? I misspoke, sorry. The mother of my child, or a relative, someone I just can't get away from. And it's hard to coexist. Or bring it into religion. What if it's a religion that teaches racism? Remember, there was a whole group, the Church of Jesus Christ Christian. I don't even know if they still exist, but I found them on the internet many, many years ago. And they're anti-Semitic, so they hate the Jews, they hate the blacks. I'm Catholic, so I'm assuming they hate me as well. They certainly know who they hate. I'm not sure who they love, but nevertheless, just me being me, I sent them an email. Because I was curious. I'm like, I know you're anti-Jewish. I understand that. I'm not trying to convert anybody. That's your view. You're not going to move from it. All right, fine. But I am curious how you deal with Jesus, because wasn't Jesus a Jew? I thought Jesus was Jewish. Stupid me. I'm sure they had, because they would figure out, well, there must be some way Jesus wasn't really Jewish, or they redefine what Judaism is, so it does not include people like Jesus. But whatever. They never responded. But I was curious, and I thought, what better way to find out than to ask? How else do you know if you don't ask? So I did. I was sincere. I wasn't setting them up for anything. But how do you coexist with that? Something that, in my case, I would believe was incredibly false. Or if you have a religion that does teach that terrorism is legitimate. It is legitimate to just indiscriminately, without any concern for the innocent, just to try to blow up and kill your enemies. So, for example, in the document, they reject terrorism. They very clearly reject violence. It says that, we call upon, this is a quote, we call upon all concerned to stop using religions to incite hatred, violence, extremism, and blind fanaticism, and to refrain from using the name of God to justify acts of murder, exile, terrorism, and oppression. They're great. I'm on board with that. As a religious person, I accept that. I agree with that. But how does their view coexist with a position that does not accept that? That thinks that terrorism is justified when you're warring against your enemies that you think are attacking your religion? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It's just a question that came into my head, and I throw it out there. They don't really address it in the document. They just assume that people are of goodwill, and that sometimes these ideas are self-evident to everybody, that of course, you don't incite hatred and fanaticism. Well, yeah, you incite hatred. If these people are trying to destroy you, you don't love them. Remember Christopher Hitchens? Our friend Christopher Hitchens from God Is Not Great, the book God Is Not Great. He didn't say it in that interview with Anderson Cooper, but he says it somewhere in the book God Is Not Great. I believe he says it in the book God Is Not Great. But I remember the quotation, and I know it comes from him. He says, you Christians are about love. He says, love your enemies. He's like, no way. I don't want to love my enemies. I want to see my enemies completely destroyed. Why? Because they're trying to kill me too. That's why they're enemies. They don't wish me well. So I'm not sure I see how their views can coexist with that kind of view. So what do you do? What is the solution? Well, the solution seems to be dialogue. Dialogue. Which simply means conversation. What is dialogue? It's conversation. And that's what it means in Greek. Dialegomai, to talk, to use language, to dialogue. So what is dialogue? It's an exchange of ideas or opinions between persons, between people. Generally, talking doesn't kill. Not talking. Unless, of course, you say something so awful that you give the person a heart attack, and that's what you intended to do. Well, then, talking kills. Okay? But generally, talking to people even about stuff you really disagree about, and hearing things that you might not want to hear, it might make you angry, but it's probably not going to kill you or cause you physical harm. So dialogue, talking together, finding out where people disagree and why they disagree. By talking, you uncover differences. Yes, that's one of the things that you do. You discover differences that you have. But you also discover commonalities, things that bring you together, things that you can agree on. You do agree on. Like, for example, Indian food is like the best food on the planet, bar none. Certainly my top 5. Commonalities can be embraced. When you agree, you can say, okay, we agree, we're not going to fight about that. We agree on X, you can embrace the commonality. But differences in dialogue, when you come across differences, you can recognize them, you can note them, and you can acknowledge them. And that's important. Recognizing, noting, and acknowledging the differences is important. Are you like highlighting everything? Oh, woman. Yes. What a great student. She's like highlighting her notes as she's doing, like, this is really important. So I put that. No, that's not so important. I won't highlight that. All right. Thank you. You made my night. Okay. But this is important, that you're recognizing, noting, and acknowledging them. Dialogue is not negotiation. Okay, that's something that people have to kind of understand when they come to dialogue between religions or dialogue with different groups, political groups or whatever. You're not really negotiating. You're not saying, okay, I as a Christian will accept, I will give up some of my beliefs if you give up some of your beliefs. We'll come to a compromise. So, I'll agree with Islam that Jesus was a great and powerful and holy man, and Muslims will accept that about him, and that he was a great teacher. But I'll give up my belief that he was the Son of God and that he was God in the flesh and stuff like that. Those beliefs of Christians, I'll give those up, and we'll compromise. We'll negotiate. That's not what dialogue is, because that's not truly dialogue. You're not really accepting the differences. Differences must be accepted. Otherwise, the other person doesn't feel like you're truly being listened to. The person, you say, no, I really believe this about Jesus, or no, I really believe this about the Quran, or a Buddhist might say, I really believe this is the purpose of existence. Okay, that I might completely disagree with that, with whatever views they might have on those things, but it has to be accepted. It doesn't mean I agree with it. It means I accept that this is something that is different from what I believe. And I've heard you, and I've listened to you. Dialogue is not the place necessarily to try to change minds or convince people. That's not really what's going on. Okay? It's enough to start out to note what the differences are, so that you don't make the mistake of thinking that they're not there. That there aren't any differences. Like, oh yeah, I hear that Muslims believe in Jesus. Oh, they must believe in Jesus like Christians do. No. So now through a dialogue with a person who is a person of faith, of the Islamic faith, you can understand that, oh, okay, no, this is a real difference between us. I'm not making that mistake. Or think that, oh, Jesus was Jewish, therefore Jews love Jesus. They think Jesus is great. No. There are a lot of Jews that don't think Jesus was great. Because they don't think he was the Messiah. They think he was a false Messiah. Difference. So you realize that you might be making a mistake of thinking that there is a commonality, but also by learning about the differences, you learn not to give offense in certain areas. I know that around Muslim believers probably should not joke about Jesus very much. Not as much as I do, I don't know, I just love Jesus and I joke with him, he's like a friend, you joke with your friend. But however, if I were to go to a mosque or something, I would know you do not do that, because Jesus is one of the great prophets. He's one of the great messengers of God. And he is held in such high respect that you don't say he was wrong. You don't imply he was wrong about anything. You don't make fun of him. You certainly don't use his name as a swear word. I don't understand people who are like, will say they're Christians and they will use the name of Jesus Christ as a swear word. I don't understand where that's coming from at all. Because they don't use like George Washington's name as a swear word. They don't say, oh, hit your hand and Joe Biden. No, but it's Jesus Christ or something, I don't get that. I don't understand where that comes from. But anyways, and I will note this is just my own little hobby horse. You hear it all the time on television now. I don't know if there's something going on there. I don't want to be paranoid, but it's like scripts are written, and scripts are gone over 1 million times to me, so I don't know what's going on there, because I never hear them use the name of any other religious figure in any kind of disrespectful way. Anywho, so you learn where not to give an offense, okay, through dialogue, all right? Acceptance of difference does not mean agreement. I already said that. It doesn't mean you're accepting the view. But where do we go from here when we have a view that you can't accept? Well, we go to this, tolerance. Tolerance. Whoops. Oh, well, I shouldn't have made that promise. I apologize. Tolerance, from tolero, which means to bear up, to support, to endure something. And that's what tolerance is. You are enduring or sympathizing with the beliefs or practices that are different from yours. I can sympathize with different beliefs to some extent. How do I do that? I try to understand why another believes what he or she does, to see the logic of that belief, to see even the benefits of that belief. The problem, I think, and the question for me comes in, but what if you believe those beliefs are wrong? You can tolerate a difference, okay? But what if that difference, like in the case of violence, what if you're dealing with a group or a person that believes that it is okay to react in violence against another group that they believe is opposing them, and that's just their belief? Well, I guess if I think about it, what really matters is my response. My response would be, well, I don't believe that, and I'm not going to participate in it. And tolerance might have to become at some point even opposition, where I tell the person, look, I'm not going to participate in it. In fact, I'm going to oppose you on it, that I don't think you should be doing this, and I'm going to be working for the peaceful alternatives rather than the violent ones. Or I'm not going to Or in the case of someone, say, who's racist, my example before, someone who's racist, look, I don't agree with your views. I'm not going to support your views. In fact, I oppose your views. I'm not going to vote in a racist manner. I'm not going to say racist things. I'm not going to do things, go with you to a racist rally, just because you're my friend. And hey, I'm not going to do it. You want to invite me to your weddings, and you have your wedding, and you have a bunch of Confederate flags and racist slogans. Sorry, I'm probably, God bless you. I'm glad you love each other, but I'm probably not going to show up. That doesn't mean we're not still friends. Could mean that, but let's not push it. So are there limits to tolerance? When does tolerance become opposition? If I believe something is completely wrong on something that really matters, can I try? Maybe that's the point where you do try to convince the person to your point of view. But always, you have to allow yourself to be open to being convinced as well, because I'm not saying okay, let my racist friend convince me that racism is right. There are some things that obviously you're not going to be convinced of. But what I mean is that it's not like you're God in a sense, like you're the lawgiver, like I know everything 100% that people should believe and do. No, you also have to be reciprocal and reciprocate that there might be things in your life and in your way of thinking that might also you might need to be convinced are not correct. That's part of dialogue, being open to that correction of someone saying, look, Matthew, okay, I understand what you're saying about X, but you talk about Y, and I think you're wrong about that. I can't just immediately say, no, of course I'm not. Why? Why am I not wrong? Because I'm Matthew. And Matthew's never wrong. Okay. So, I'll move on from that. I have examples, but I'll move on from my examples because then I'll keep on talking. How do we... Oh, okay. Difference allows for the people who are talking to express their contrary views. Is this no, that's a tolerance. The difference, when we allow for difference and different ideas and different opinions, it allows for the people who are speaking to each other to express their contrary views, all right, which may cause the other person to change his or her view. But it also might give another person understanding. A person might go into a dialogue thinking, for example, I'm not saying it, in Islam, they make women wear veils because they want to oppress them. They want to keep them under control. They want to make sure that women always know that they're of secondary status to men. Someone might go into dialogue with that, and then might encounter a Muslim woman in dialogue who says, no, that's not the case. We don't wear veils. Some might say, yes, it is. But some might say, no, it's not the case that we do that. We don't do that because we're not equals. We do it because we don't want to be treated as sexual objects by men. We don't want men ogling us and looking at us and staring at us as if we were some kind of possible sex object. Also, we believe in our God, and we believe that our God, through our prophet, has told us that this is an appropriate way to show our modesty, to show a proper way to dress. Okay, fine. So now you might gain some understanding, and it might change your view. Finding commonalities helps reinforce the communion amongst the speakers, shows where they agree. It also helps show them areas in which concretely they can work together. Once you understand where you agree, you can see, okay, we can work on this. When for example, both of you see that, wow, poverty is one of the biggest indicators for violence. Okay, well, I'm a Jew, you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're an atheist, whatever. We now all see these things, we all agree on these things. What now can we do to address them? Because if we address the poverty, maybe we can take away the violence. So especially in regards to differences, discussion or dialogue should include how to navigate the very real differences without resorting to hate or violence. See, this is what you want to get to. where dialogue should lead to where you're finding solutions to where you have differences, solutions that are not hateful and not violent. That's your purpose. That, of course, if you can't, then dialogue completely breaks down. But the purpose of dialogue is to try to see, we have very real differences on something, we have commonalities on some things, but we have very real differences. How can we address those differences without resorting to complete hate and violence towards each other? And you can do that through coexistence, through tolerance, through further dialogue. Okay. Done with that. Now I'm going to quickly go over a study guide. We'll quickly go over the study guide. The test is done. The test will be 100 questions. You have the full time limit of the class to get it done. So you have 2.5 hours. The class starts at 5:30 and it goes until 8 p.m. So you will have from 5:30 until 8 p.m. to complete the test. So with 100 questions, that's over a minute for each question. Okay. It's 750 points, remember, so each question will be worth 7.5 points. This is the way it works out. There are true, false, multiple choice, matching, multiple answer, everything that there are no fill-ins and no essays. So basically everything that you've seen on the quizzes is on the test. And I will tell you this, you can see the quiz answers, yes?
No.
For any of them?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I asked now. Why didn't I ask weeks ago? Because I, on Blackboard, selected that they should all be, now I'm not justifying, I'm just explaining the process, that, you get to the bottom of the page and it says, I selected a certain date and said, see answers, and I went all across, see correct answers, see incorrect answers, anyways. And so Blackboard on that date, which should have been the Wednesday after each quiz, should have allowed you to see or give you some way to go in. But
You said the final exam is multiple choice, is that what you said?
yeah, well, it includes multiple choice. There'll be multiple answer and also matching and true false. Okay. Now, and I think I got to tell you, even on student view, I cannot see really what you're seeing. It's not. I have a name for Blackboard. I call it Black Turd because that's what it is. I've used it before. I despise it, but there's nothing you can do about it. We have to use it. So even on student view on Blackboard, I cannot see 100% what it looks like to you. So like if I go on the quizzes, it doesn't show me the answers. I can't, even after the quiz is done and after the due date. So I don't know whether you can see them or not. So I don't know how to advise you where to go to find the answers. There's supposed to be, should be something like a link or something, from what I understand. Yes.
So like right now I'm clicking on quizzes, and like I clicked on quiz number 1, and it just asks me to like begin the quiz.
Okay.
So click on that, because obviously it won't let you take quiz, and then it will say, see previous attempts, or something like that.
Oh.
It will do that?
But it doesn't give you the question.
It just tells me the grade that you got. It doesn't give us, what was right and what was wrong.
Oh, that's ridiculous. All right, so this looks like it's going to have to be, what's the help desk issue? Well, I forget they have the name UTAC or something like that, but I'm going to have to call up the UTAC, the help desk people, and just say what's going on, because yeah, this seems like it's clearly a Blackboard issue, because I can show you everything is selected. In fact, what?
You're not.
Huh?
I just made your help.
Oh, all right. All right, tell us, please, Mrs. Storga.
Okay, so depending on what quiz you go to, it'll say like, hey, take the test. Pick begin. And then the grade course is counted. They literally just click on your grade. And it pops up.
I can't see that on student view, so that's the whole thing. I can't advise. Yes, Ms. Willis?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, no. All righty. So we've all got that? Anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so what you can do, you should be able to print it out or save it on the computer, or maybe print it out, whatever. Basically, if you've taken the quizzes, you've already taken the final exam. Okay? Because pretty much all the, I mean, there are more questions that are on the quizzes than there are on the final exam. Okay, so I have not used all of the questions. But, you know, if you've taken, I pretty much have left the questions alone. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I may have changed the answers around a little bit so they're not the same. But for the most part, they're the same thing. So if you know, take the quizzes and you look at the answers and you also look at your notes to fill in the blanks on some things, then you should be okay. Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Storga. In fact, I'll give you some, remind me to give you extra credit after class for that. God bless you for figuring that out. Okay, so questions you should ask yourself. I'm not going to go, there are a lot of them. But, you know, basically what I did was I took over like the questions I asked on the test and just put them over into the study guide. I mean, these are not exactly the same. I summarized them. So I didn't like, what did Augustine say about time? I don't tell you what he said about time. But if you go on the quizzes and you go in your notes from the beginning of the course, then you should be able to find it. What is his role in the just war doctrine? I mean, I asked you about that, but I don't tell you what the answer is. I talked a bunch about religion and at the beginning of the course and made my argument, my case for that there is a concept called religion. So I would say you should look in your notes on that one. Certainly look in the quizzes as well, but look in your notes on that one because I talked a bit about what I think religion is and why I think you can identify something as religion. And okay, is there anything else that I want to mention? A lot of these I think are self-explanatory. Does anyone have any questions? Does anything jump out as unclear? Yes, Ms. Philistine. Yeah, you should know about like why is when we talked about, just say for example, the autonomic nervous system. What did we talk about it in relation to, and what was its importance? Okay, that's what I mean about people and things you should know. Clifford Geertz, like I talked about him briefly, so that might. But Clifford Geertz, he's mentioned in the quizzes, so if you look him up in the quizzes, you'll know what I'm referring to. But I talked about him briefly in his view of religion and what religion kind of gives. He mentioned facticity, about religion kind of gives a certain factualness to the world, or religion has a certain factualness to it. Which, I'll be quiet. It makes it seem like it's real, like what you believe is real and stuff like that. So that's what I'm referring to with these. Does that make any sense? Words for which you should know the definitions. I hope I got every word on here that I asked for a definition, but that should be self-explanatory. Just know the definition, be able to recognize it. And there are 4 extra credit questions at the end. I don't know if anyone has any questions about those, or they seem to be self-explanatory. But if you do have any questions, just send me an email. I will not give you the answer, but again, all of this, don't be taken aback by, for example, like the first section is so long. All of the answers are on the quizzes. So if you've taken the quizzes, you've taken the final exam. Use the quizzes as the basis for your study for the answers. But anything that's not clear from the quizzes, then I would say also look in your notes to kind of fill in the gaps. Okay? Okie dokie. So I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend. Have a good night. Thank you.